Hello, sorry about that. I always have to kind of re-figure out how streaming works. Okay, I'm just going to start, and people can kind of come in when they come in. Hello, everybody. Can everybody hear me okay? Mic check, mic check. Let's see how my audio is here. Oh, let me record this too. There we go. Yeah, somebody let me know if I'm coming through. It looks good on my side. I just want to make sure. Okay. All right. Happy 2026, everybody. Hopefully, it's happier than 2025. Uh, I just wanted to kind of recap everything that happened in 2025. Um, the year started off well enough. To get a little bit TMI and personal, I had a surgery. It was for something that's not a very serious issue that I had. It was a hernia, which is not a spinal hernia, but it was just a muscular hernia. It was just causing a lot of discomfort. I had it since 2019, and it was just getting really uncomfortable. So I had that stitched up. And then I consulted on a cool Chinese movie, doing a ton of mocap at Super Alloy. Released If These Fists Could Talk in February. If you haven't gotten a copy, please get a copy at Amazon. If you like reading about violence and anthropology and action movies, it's kind of it's it's autobiographical. It's kind of a theory of everything, but so far a lot of good reviews. If anybody's read it, by the way, please review it on Amazon. I would love to, have your review on Amazon. The first part of the year, I was researching anthropology of Southwest native tribes because I wanted to do a sequel to Contour with Dennis. It's called Detour, and unfortunately, he died, and that really kind of like shook up the whole indie scene. He died on April 7th. Um, and we were all kind of hung over for months from that because it just didn't make any sense. Um, and then got back into the swing of things, and I started doing more, uh, a lot more reading and research. I started reviewing books on the YouTube channel. That's been going okay. There are some controversial takes, I guess, that I like. I reviewed Blind Sight, and the reviews are just like they hate it. The comments just hate that review. It's pretty funny. And then others, people kind of seem to like what I'm saying. So it's kind of hit or miss with those. Um, they do about as well as Action Talks did, which is a little bit disheartening because like I thought the algorithm would really like Action Talks, and it just really petered out, and that's why 2025 I just wasn't really doing much Action Talks. I did. Let me see. I'll pull up my uploads for the year. So I did finally release the Mars episode recently, and just yesterday I released the Slow Clap episode. I do want to be semi-regular with these again. We'll see how that goes. So I just can't really promise anything. So did a couple panels again. I did a science of action design panel at the SoCal Gaming Expo in June, which is kind of a book promotion, but also just a discussion of what I've been studying about science and violence and all that. I did, and that's on YouTube. There's a YouTube upload of that. I went to Comic Con and did my own panel this year on the anthropology of Kung Fu cinema. That's also on my on the YouTube channel. Um, Again, these don't get many views because I don't think the algorithm really thinks that these are like in line with my channel, but we'll see. Maybe that'll change over time. But while I was at Comic Con, I was on Rick Meyer's panel. I do that every year, and he was showing the best of 2025, and every action scene was like a cold-blooded revenge killer, vengeance cinema, and they're good. But oh my gosh, have we been doing this for like 15 years now? Ever since the raid, people think that that's the only way to do action is okay, we're in a room and the bad guys are coming. Okay, I got a Coke can. I'm gonna rip the Coke can and cut throats with the two sides of the Coke can. I've got a book. I'm gonna jam it in the guy's mouth and hit the book. How many like times have we done that? I've got a mug. I'm gonna smash him in the face with it, and I'm gonna take this and I'm gonna hook it into his nose and rip his nose out. Like you can do that all day, I guess. That's sort of the style now. And I don't know. It just doesn't really inspire me the way that it used to. And I could kind of tell in the audience, it was like, there was this really good one, a really technically good one. I think it was Thai or maybe it was Chinese, but it was in a kitchen, super violent. People throwing like boiling oil on people, really well performed, great props, great everything, except, oh my gosh, 15 years of this. And I started kind of getting the feeling in the audience that they wanted to laugh. And I said, you know what? And I didn't really have anything to show that year. I showed the trailer for my book, and I said, okay, next year I'm bringing a comedy. I'm bringing an action comedy back here because he did show one funny action movie, but I don't know if it was meant to be funny. It was a Bronson Lee kind of schlocky, Bruce Lee exploitation uh, um, movie where he's fighting on a volcano against this guy, and he's got nunchuck. It's hilarious, but definitely not like new. It's from 1975. It's a 50-year-old clip, and everybody was dying laughing at this. They thought it was the greatest thing because they were able to laugh. So that really inspired me to work on a short film and make my own short film and get back into that. I kind of needed a little bit of a catalyst. I didn't quite know what how exactly to approach it, what subject material I should do. Rope It Up 3 was out at that point. And so, I kind of went back and I just kind of put it in the back of my head. And then, so meanwhile, I started shooting a new Kictionary video called Kictionary Redux. I shot more of the Super Cops short, which is just like ongoing 3D animation. That's also on my channel. But then I think the thing that really kind of got my indie blood going again was, Ant came and we shot Be Humbled or Be Hired, which is this fun little, action comedy. Where I fight against Stevie, and I kind of play, this esoteric kind of guy running a mocap stage, right? And a guy comes in, like, applies for a job there, and and I hadn't really done an indie action scene in so long. And when Ant asked me if I wanted to do it, I just immediately said, like, yeah, let's do it immediately, right now. I was just so excited to do it, and after that, Joseph Lee, I think he saw that and kind of got inspired by it, came up with another idea, which is similar about like a kind of culty mocap studio owner, me. He called that SoCap 404, and we shot that with Jason Chen, who's really, really amazing. Um, so I kind of felt that spirit kind of coming alive again. And then something really amazing happened. A documentary crew wants to make a film about me. And so they came and just stayed here for a little over a week. And while they were here, we shot previs for the movie that I was working on. We shot Box with Steve Reedy, Deadly Finger with Jose, and like I really felt then like the indie feeling was coming back, and it really kind of like kindled that flame in me, and so that's how I came up with Bag Lady. Um, and I'm really excited to show you guys that. It's not ready yet. It's still in post production. Um, Maybe I can give a sneak peek at some point in another stream. And so I'm really looking forward to continuing that. And we finished shooting it. We shot it in 7 days, and I produced it, wrote it, directed it, and it was super fun. Adam McLeish executive produced it. He produced Blindsided. And so that was kind of the whole year. Finished. Oh, and last thing is end of the year, I finished my first draft for Badass on a Budget, which is my filmmaking book for all ages and all times. And in that book, I don't really go into any of the technical details, any of the technology about action filmmaking. And it's how to make an action film for $0. And I don't really go into anything about, what kind of camera to use and whether to use AI, because it doesn't matter because next year it's all going to change anyway. So you immediately kind of date yourself now when you start talking about technological best practices. Well, it's all out of date now. Anything written, 10 years ago is completely, it's almost like useless now. Where to host it, what markets to take it to, none of it really matters, and it'll just keep changing. And so all the stuff that's in Badass on a Budget is stuff that I assume has always been the same and will never change. Psychology, physiology, and relationships. And so, for example, psychology. The human mind, generally the same as it's always been. There will be some changes in the way that, the zeitgeist is making us perceive the world. But in general, the way that we see movement, the way that we perceive action, the way we associate with faces, that's never going to change. So, just basic principles about how to frame a shot. Well, what do you want the shot to say? Do you want the actor to be in the center and do you want the camera to always follow the actor, kind of Japanese style? Or do you like it when the actor goes off camera and a stuntman comes? How do you see the world and how best to show that? So, psychology, physiology, the human body, basically the same as it's always been. Unless we grow like another finger or something, by and large, we're not changing. And so all the things that have been true about Buster Keaton will probably be the same with stuntmen 100 years from now. So regarding training, fatigue, the falling reactions, things to be careful for, right? And lastly is human relations, which I think is like the most important part of the book. And really, it's how to keep a crew, how to create a core, so that you have a culture that can drive your film shoots, and also it's going to kind of dictate the theme of your film. And within that, also, within those three things, you have creativity and collaboration with other people. You have training and mentorship, and again, not touching anything about the proper way to edit a fight scene, right? How to use Avid, right? Of course, who talks about Avid anymore, right? 10 years ago, editing books talked about Avid. So that'll be Badass on a Budget. Not sure when it's going to be out, but right now it's being peer reviewed. If anybody's interested in peer reviewing it, email me at business@ericjacobus.com. Be happy to send you a proof. And in return, you'll be in the acknowledgments, and I'll get you a signed copy when it's out. Okay, so that's like the kind of basic outline of the year. And so I figured I'd go into the reading and research part. And if anybody's not interested in that stuff, they can kind of like sign off now. Thanks for coming. But so this year, I'm going to pull up my stats for this year because, as some of you may know, I'm a big reader now. I do a lot of reading. So this year I read 93 books, and total pages was 28,353. So 28,000 pages, and that's roughly that's like 70 pages a day or so. And I do all that in the morning. The reasons I was reading so much this year, many reasons. The first one was I was studying at the beginning of the year. I was trying to study myth. And because I wanted to write a book about the mythology of violence. And I was really passionate about this for a minute, but then I kind of realized how daunting mythology is because there's just too much of it. It's almost like anything cultural is mythology. And after reading like 10 books of mythology, I started just kind of losing focus and not really knowing where to go with it. So I kind of abandoned that and started researching for a fiction. Started writing a fiction called We See You, David Fringe, which is about a psychiatrist in Chicago. It's a sci-fi. It takes place in undisclosed time in the future, and it's all about this psychiatrist and his methods for helping people get out of this crazy mental health crisis, which is called berserkery, where the homeless rate is like 40 something percent in Chicago in this world, and it's because people are just getting this like rampant case of berserkery. It's kind of like they're turning into uh, walking werewolves or something. And meanwhile, there's a space station that's being run by kind of like Elon Musk type guy who has he has an AI system up there that's like the ultimate prediction machine. It's kind of like ChatGPT can predict, but it's like extremely good at predicting solar flares, uh, earthquakes, tsunamis, right? All these natural disasters. It has like a perfect prediction rate, but it's getting worse at predicting people, and he's trying to figure out why that is. And he develops this entire conspiracy theory about aliens coming and injecting themselves 2.5 million years into the past. And he thinks that David Fringe, the psychiatrist, is one of these aliens because he has such a unique way of approaching the mental health crisis. And so it is an action kind of story, but I wanted to research many things in order to kind of make this story work. One of the things I focused on, of course, I wanted to understand. I think the thing that made the most sense was studying sci-fi, just to know kind of the lay of the land. And I reviewed a few of these on the channel, like Asimov's Foundation, which I hated. But I figured I'd talk about a few of these as I go. I want to talk about the good and the bad. So to start with, I think I'll start with the bad, and this might surprise some of you. But I thought Ender's Game was a little bit on the bad side. Not that it's a bad book, but something that occurred to me as I'm reading it, and I'm not trying to be close-minded here, but I did get a hint that there's like a certain amount of Joseph Smith propaganda in this book because Speaker for the Dead definitely sounds like Joseph Smith. And when I ran this idea by a lot of people who like this book, and I said, have you ever considered the fact that this is possibly propaganda to claim that like Joseph Smith could speak for Native Americans? If you're aware of the Joseph Smith kind of ideology, I would personally look into that. So that kind of bothered me. Otherwise, it's actually very good. Uh, the book I absolutely loved was Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? Oh my gosh, this was like better than the movie. I thought it was so good. And it was written 1968, I think. Yeah, 1968. This is a 1984 edition, so they changed the cover, obviously. But man, what an amazing book because it's very different from the movie because Philip K. Dick was much more concerned about nuclear arms proliferation at the time. And so the entire thing is about like fallout and animals getting sick from fallout. There are no more animals, and so animals carry this like the animals are like dying off. There are no more animals. So this is just amazing. I was so amazed by it. Loved it. Loved the characters. There's this character that only plays a small part in the movie. What was his name? Not Pris. What was his name? Oh, I don't know. I forgot his name. But anyway, the dummy, right? The guy with the low IQ. He's such a lovable dude. And there's also this really weird kind of like cult that everybody is in where they're climbing up these stairs eternally. It was just so weird. I really wish they had done the movie like this, but movie's good too. So I read a lot of fiction. And another one was That Hideous Strength, which I really enjoyed. C.S. Lewis's sci-fi book. I'll probably do a review on that later on, though. The next thing I looked into, and this is gonna sound out there, but bear with me, is possession and exorcism. And I think possession and exorcism, I don't really subscribe to it on a spiritual level. I think anthropologically, possession and exorcism are some of the most fascinating, it's really just one thing, is one of the most fascinating kind of like facets of human civilization. And every society has them. And so I kind of like read into the whole history of possession, and also the 19th century when possession and exorcism were sort of like debunked in the West and spiritism took over. And I just really had a great time doing this. And one of the books, of course, is like The Exorcist. I reviewed that on the channel as well. I wanted to talk about a few books with this without, going to. I see people leaving already, which is fine. I get it. It's a little bit niche, but I do want to talk about. So three of the books that I love. So, and the reason I love these books is because these are attempts to sort of modernize possession and exorcism so that it's not like this weird thing. Instead, it's much more framed within psychology and psychiatry. The best one, this is still in my top 5 books of all time, Jean-Michel Agourlian's Puppet of Desire. I'm going to do a video review on that at some point, but it's fantastic and it's really hard to find. Sorry, you're probably not going to be able to get it. It's like a $200 book. I don't know why. It's really good. It doesn't need to be $200. I think it's because probably some school requires it, and therefore it's $200 on Amazon. The book you can get is Aldous Huxley's Devils of Loudun. Devils of Loudun tells the story, which is also, I did a review of this on the channel, about this convent, true story, in Loudun in the 17th century in France, that just comes down with this insane theory that they go nuts over this new guy who's moved into town who's a French official. And due to political intrigue and whatnot, this French official is really disliked by Richelieu. Really, Richelieu doesn't like this guy, and he wants him gone. And these women at this convent, these nuns, come up with this theory that this man has become a sorcerer, and he's kind of like worked witchcraft on them, basically worked sorcery on them, and they get him burned at the stake. Richelieu is more than happy to oblige that. This book is one of the greatest books I've read so far. Devils of Loudun by Aldous Huxley. What an amazing writing style, too. And this one is not so much scientific, but this is a story. It's a collection of short stories. It's called Die Book. The Book of Die Book by Gershon Winkler. And this opened my eyes to Jewish exorcism and possession. I knew nothing about Jewish exorcism and possession. I think it's so fascinating because Jewish possession, unlike Catholic possession is much more kind of or exorcism is much more of like a kind of a game of endurance from the priest. Jewish exorcism is like a puzzle where the rabbi comes in and he tries to understand who the spirit is and what they're holding, what they're resentful for still, so he can resolve the problem and do the whatever rites need to be done, and then eventually, expel this spirit. And it always goes through a little hole in the window, and everybody confirms that it goes through this hole in the window. I thought this was like one of the most fascinating things, and this is the kind of stuff that most people don't really know about. When they think possession, they only think of Catholic possession and exorcism. It's very different, totally different. And it mostly comes out of Safed in Israel in the 16th century, which is kind of it's around the time of the Jewish Enlightenment, and that's when the Kabbalah appears. And the Kabbalah is heavily predicated on that kind of like mysticism, and it adopted a lot of stuff from Christianity and Islam as well. So it's just this fascinating look at kind of like 16th century Judaism. The book that kind of on my bad list is Michael Prescott's The Far Horizon. Somebody recommended this. I'm not sure why, because it's like a very kind of credulous take on all the spiritism of the 19th century. And he sort of tells all of the kind of regular fables of Eusapia Palladino and who's the Boston woman from Quest for Dean Bridgman Connor. All these spirit mediums that were tricksters. Houdini kind of exposed these spirit mediums as tricksters. It's actually how he got a lot of his tricks. And Prescott just kind of like writes their accounts out and claims that because there were so many eyewitnesses, they must be true. Um, and books like this, I find, are just too credulous. They're probably confirming some kind of bias that he has, and I found it to just be very low quality reading. Not recommended. So spirit possession was a big part of my studying this year, and it's incredibly interesting. There's this one author, Amy Tanner. She wrote Leonora Piper. That was the other medium. Amy Tanner wrote a a critique of Leonora Piper, who was a spirit medium in Boston, and she's this amazing character, Amy Tanner, early 20th century. There's this picture of her wearing she's kind of a tomboy, and she's sitting with like 30 guys, and they all look like Freud. All these guys, right? They're all like in their 40s and 50s, smoking pipes. And here she is, this beautiful 20-year-old woman who's kind of a tomboy, hanging with these guys and trying to debunk spiritism in the early 20th century. I thought that is the coolest character for a movie. Somebody's got to do a movie about this woman. Amy Tanner. I gotta admit, I got kind of a crush. Okay, I read a lot of science books, a lot of evolution books, a lot of anthropology also. The kind of two different books that I read are, on the one hand, you have a very kind of like functionalist evolutionary perspective on human origins, and on the other, I read some structuralist books. And the books that I picked as my favorites are structuralist. And if I can describe structuralism versus functionalism real quick in anthropology, functionalism looks at something like baptism or circumcision, right? And it says, what is the function of that thing? And what does it do for the society? And let's compare that to all the other societies. And it sort of like creates this idea that human cultures are very diverse because the Bantu have this kind of circumcision, but the Malaysians have this kind of circumcision. I don't even know if Malaysians do this, but whatever it is, there's this kind of notion that diversity is like all the different forms that the same ritual takes, right? That's kind of like the functionalist view, and comparative religion is sort of born out of this theory that human societies are all extremely different. Structuralism kind of flips that on its head and says, well, actually, all of these things that, all of these rituals are for, witchcraft, for example, and exorcism, they actually all kind of stem from the same place in terms of, psychology or interpersonal dynamics. And then you kind of get the same patterns everywhere. They're just kind of different. The aesthetics change, and that's it. That's structuralism. And structuralism doesn't really posit origins so much. It's not really interested in that. It's kind of difficult to find the origin of anything. It's almost like etymology. It's like trying to find the origin of the word bread, right? Well, it's like in a way, like you'll never find it because if the structuralist view is that bread comes from, that's like not a good example. I can't actually tell you what the origin of that is. Like villain is a better example. Villain comes from the idea. Villain comes from. I wrote this in If These Fists Could Talk. Comes from a word connoting a town, like just a commoner. And at some point, a commoner became a bad guy. I don't know how, but that's just kind of the etymology of it. But before that, it was this, and before that, it was this, and you can always go back in time. And the idea of like the first time that word appears is kind of like pointless because what happens at the beginning is that words just kind of split off into double meanings and they kind of like take on their own definitions over time. That's the structuralist view. So my favorite books are structuralist. So the ones that I selected are Original Sin, which deals with INCEST. I probably can't say that word right now on YouTube. This is an amazing structuralist view on INCEST. I won't say any more. I don't know why anybody would be interested in reading this, but for me, it's very relevant to my Roba hypothesis because the theory that the theory has been that what, maybe just look into it. I won't go into it because I think YouTube won't like if I talk about INCEST. Even though like anthropology talks about it all the time, but YouTube's weird. So I picked 3 books. That was the first one. The second one is The Gift by Marcel Mauss. Marcel Mauss is this amazing anthropologist that sort of changed anthropology in the 30s, I think. Um, is that right? I don't know, but he was a Jewish man who lived in France. Um, had to wear the star during during Vichy France, and came to the States. And I think he came to the States. Maybe he didn't. Maybe he just stayed in France. Sorry, my history of him's useless. But anyway, uh, the gift is his theory that at the origin of society is gift giving, gift exchange, and the idea that at the beginning, the first economy is not really about buying and selling. It's not about barter. It's about obligations and responsibilities. And the gift is sort of symbolic of obligations. And so one of the examples he gives is the Native American potlatch in the Pacific Northwest. He focuses on 4 tribes: the Haida, Tlingit, Tsimshian, and Kwakiutl. And what they would do is these tribes would get together and put on these massive feasts and gift giving kind of celebrations. And when you attended these things, you also had to bring gifts and you had to exchange these gifts. Because if you were given a gift, let's say you were given, I don't know, let's say you were given blankets. And if you don't return something, now you are completely obligated to that person, and they kind of like own you to a certain extent. So gift giving was a way, and so not only were gifts given, but gifts were destroyed. They would destroy wealth. They would take huge amounts of property, and they would demonstrate their status by destroying property. And in some ways, when you destroyed your property, that would relieve you of your debts. And if that sounds irrational, well, I recommend looking at this because it actually makes complete sense in kind of ancient thinking. And we've come so far from that because, again, at the origin, the gift is the giving and the receiving. And you can see this still etymologically in languages like Chinese, where to buy and to sell is mai and mai. It's the same word, it just has a slight tonal change. In Shanghainese, it's the same exact pronunciation. Buy and sell, mai, mai. It's the exact same word. And so at the origin, buying and selling is the same thing, and it splits. And then those two things take on their own kind of meanings over time. Very good. Hard to read. It's hard to read because it's written in French. And anytime anything's written in French, anthropology, oh my gosh, it's impossible to read. Last one is Stone Age Economics. This is one of my favorites. Marshall Solins. Marshall Solins was incredible. University of Chicago anthropologist. Structural, and this is where I heard about the gift. His main point in this book is that ancient societies, hunter-gatherer societies, many of whom still exist today, um, they were not really as subsistence-based as we think. They actually had plenty of excess. They had freeloaders. They had short work days. There were days where they just didn't work at all. He goes through all these case studies of Australians, Africans, Native Americans, and finds out that like they were not hunting 15 hours a day, 7 days a week. They would hunt 2 days a week. Some days they would just do nothing. They would sit around. They would tell us, well, not do nothing, but you're not working. You're not working your butt off. And in his the kind of thing you come away with after reading something like this is that, oh my gosh, we work way harder than hunter gatherers did, and how's that possible? So that's an interesting kind of puzzle that he proposes. Your mileage may vary. Maybe you'll read this and you'll say, "Wait a minute, I don't know. My experience says something else." But anyway, it's a great read. Marshall Solins writes really well too. So if you're interested in structuralism, this is the guy to read. So those are the good anthropology and science books. And another one that I finished this year, but I talked about it in last year's recap, is Darwin's Variation of Animals and Plants Under Domestication. Part 2, also excellent. That's like my favorite book that Darwin wrote. I also read Darwin's Voyage of the Beagle, which is his first book. It was okay. It's kind of interesting just because he talks about the situation in South American politics at the time, and truth is stranger than fiction. Okay, so two books that I felt. So the first one is. So these are books I didn't like. Peter Singer's Darwinian Left. Singer kind of makes this argument that a lot of people in the 90s were making, which is that the left, the political left, and he's speaking mostly in academia, right? The political left needed a religion, and the religion he proposes is Darwinism, um, which is interesting because at least that's honest. Because I think nowadays people will kind of parrot Darwinian theories about origin of humans, speciation, abiogenesis, aliens. It's all very like hypothetical. There's no real proof of it. They've not been able to recreate any of these things, and they say it like it's gospel. And so he's just saying, well, why don't we just say that it's gospel? So it's interesting. It's very honest, but I don't agree. So I guess in a way it's a good book, even though I totally disagree with it. But at least it's not disingenuous. Um, and the Ape People by Jeffrey Bourne. I don't know. It's just another one of these books that claims that people are just like apes. And I'm kind of tired of that stuff. I don't know if I'm going to read any more of that stuff. It's really kind of grating. Okay, another thing I studied for the Fringe book is space stations. I did this whole thing about, I read this whole, like 4 or 5 books on space stations. Salyut, which is the first Russian space station. Astronaut's Guide to Life, which is about, what was his name? What was his name? Let me get his name right now. Chris Hadfield. Chris Hadfield's experience on, what was it? It was on, I can't remember. Was in the ISS. He was on the ISS for months, and he did a whole bunch of tweets. Also, he did like 65, not tweets, 65 YouTube videos or so, just like showing the mundane stuff that happens on a spaceship, like a space station, like how to brush your teeth and how to trim your hair, things like that. And it's really interesting. I am curious how like space deniers explain that stuff. I guess to them he's in a movie studio somewhere and it's all fake. Anyway, there was an incredible book about the space race is the right stuff. Tom Wolfe's book. I don't really know how much I can say about this. Like this turned me into a Tom Wolfe fan. It's so well written, and oh my gosh, it just reads so well. I don't really want to spoil it. It's amazing. The right stuff. Really inspiring. You can feel it the way that he writes. I wish I wish man, I wish I could write like that. Um I'm gonna read some comments as I go here. So let's see. Um okay, let me see. What is somebody's so Byron, you're mentioning we have more angst than hunter gatherers. I think that's generally true. Hunter gatherers have a different kind of angst, which is a little bit more. I mean, they'll kill their children sometimes if they don't have enough food, but I don't know how common that is. Um, it didn't seem too common, but I think you're generally right that modern technological society has way more angst than hunter-gatherer society. There's a great book about that called The Technological Society by Jacques Ellul, and also I can't think of the other one. Oh well, it doesn't matter. Yeah, Hatfield's also said you can't even bathe in space. It's true. Can't bathe. They had this like sleeve that you can put over you, and you kind of like scrub yourself with a wet wipe, and then you have to vacuum it all away. It sounds like a pain. I don't know. Just going to space. Uh, I think I'll just avoid doing that. It just seems like a pain. So that was my study into spiritism, science, and space. for David Fringe, and I plan on writing that book in the next few months, and I'm really excited about that. I'm halfway done with it, and I really hope that somebody will, you guys will want to review it. Byron, thank you for the $10 donation. What do you feel is more important in a fight, knowledge or ferocity or something else in a fight? In a real fight, knowledge. I think that in a real fight, if you're in the middle of a fight, it might be too late, right? Like the best way to avoid a fight is knowledge is good, but like practice de-escalation. I talk about this in the book where there are two main ways to study martial arts. It seems there's the limbic style and the cognitive style, or the cerebral style. The limbic style teaches you to react at a moment's notice. If somebody touches you on the shoulder, you do the grab, you do the elbow, stomp the feet, bash the nuts, that whole thing. That's the limbic style. Uh, versus the cerebral style, which teaches very slow martial arts. This is the way I learned. This is the way Dennis taught. You learn slow martial arts, and that way, when a situation comes up, you're thinking through options, and you can think through them quickly because you've put words to everything. It's not really an emotional situation; it's a much more cognitive situation. So what you're trying to do is remove the emotion from the altercation so that you can kind of analyze what's going on and make a decision. And you can do that very quickly. Human cognition is incredibly quick. And I know that when, when I was robbed at gunpoint on Rope-a-Dope 2, in my head, this dude's pointing a gun at me from 4 feet away. And in my head, I'm kind of going through like, okay, so one option would be to close the gap, go to the outside, to the arm bar. Okay, that would be one way. And the second way would be to like try and go up and get the elbow. I could do that. I could just kick him in the nuts. But I'm just thinking through it. So what I've done is, instead of like acting on things in a limbic way, I'm going through it cerebrally, kind of like weighing my options. And then there's this other voice on top of that that's saying like, yeah, even if you come up with a plan, don't do it. Don't do it. Don't do anything. Just stand there. Feel free to think about it, but just stand there and do nothing. And that's what I did. And after 5 seconds, he was gone. So that's what I recommend. I think there's a lot of self-help kind of martial art material out there now, where the answers to aggression are counter-aggression, and I don't know how often that's a good idea. Because I think about home invasions too, and I just, if somebody were to come into my home, what am I gonna do? Am I gonna go get my gun and start shooting him? I don't know. Do I need to? Like, how important is that? Maybe I just need to like get my family and run out of the house. That would work. I'm sure they would prefer that. It's definitely going to be a shorter day. Or it's going to be an easier day for me if I don't go shooting in the house. I would rather just like lose my stuff and not my family, but I'll take my family. But like most likely a home invasion wants nothing to do with you. And they just want you out of the way. That's why most of the time they only go into houses if they don't know anybody's there. But if you're limbically trained to start shooting an intruder, then you might gun the guy down and you might be in the right. Let's just assume, if you live in Nevada, you're going to be probably in the right. Still, that dude's got a family who's going to get an attorney, and you're probably going to go to jail for at least the night, right? So you're already wasting way more time than had you just left the house, right? So you're going to go to jail. You might get out the next day. Okay, now you got to go to court. So now you need a lawyer. Are you going to pay for a lawyer? Okay, you got to do that. And you got to countersue for your lawyer fees, right? Is this really worth it now? Like, should you have shot? under the supposition that a home invader like wants to shoot you, I think some people might be like a little bit too self-important and think like, oh, if somebody's coming into my house, they want to kill me. No, they don't. They want your stuff. They want your stuff. The less trouble you give them, the better, in my opinion. And I know that makes me one of those guys that's just like, oh, well, people aren't standing up because of you. Well, the thing is, you have more to lose than they do, right? So the more trouble you give them, it's more likely that they're going to want to attack you than if somebody else were to give you trouble, right? You wouldn't do that. So anyway, I agree. Counter-aggression, slippery slope. All right, moving on. So one of the things that I was really interested in this year is studying Chinese anthropology. And the one of the first things I read this year was J.M.M. de Groot's Religious System of China. And this is part 1 of 6. There's 6 of them. They're up there. Where are they? They're right there. So, and man, what an amazing story. I think I've talked about this multiple times. But J.M.M. de Groot was a missionary working in Fujian, and which was called Amoy back then. I don't know why. They had such weird names back then. Amoy, Fujian. And he understood Mandarin and the Fujian dialect, which is what they speak in Taiwan, I think, also, Hokkien. And so he just goes to primary sources and just goes through the entire litany of Chinese religion, if you want to call it a religion. It's really like it's really like this really complex kind of spiritual patchwork. The thing that I took away from this, and I wrote this in Ken and Caliber on my website, it's an article, that the first Chinese city might have been a temple. Or, excuse me, the first Chinese city might have been a grave, a burial spot, a tomb. And that when you have a tomb, you bury your dead there, right? And like everywhere else in the world, again, this is structuralism speaking here. Everywhere in the world, when you bury your dead, the dead just don't go away. There's this kind of continual, either evil or good kind of effect of the dead that are in the ground, especially if they're not moving anywhere. There are Native American societies that hang them in trees and they dry them out, but even then they're either shipped off somewhere or they're put into the ground. Anyway, they have some kind of destination, right? And if they're in the ground, then that area kind of has this like quality to it because of the dead, who become almost like patrons of the land. So trees that come up out of that land are supposed to be kind of imbued with the spirit of the dead. And so it's kind of in your interest to maintain that grave for multiple reasons. First of all, you want to make sure that it's kind of a public health issue. This is what the Romans were really, had this real hard on about making sure that when you buried somebody that you maintained that grave. Even if you sold the property, you would get an easement onto that grave and you would continue making sacrifices because they viewed it as a public health problem. Because they don't want ghosts wandering around causing plague and and like droughts and things like that. And if there's a drought, then they'll blame you because they'll look on the roster and they'll say, hey, Eric wasn't feeding his dead dad. He wasn't doing it. He hasn't been sacrificing his dead. Well, we've got this crisis now, and the rulers are supposed to do that anyway. So everywhere in the world, there's this belief that a tomb has this quality to it, and so you want to maintain that tomb. And it's possible that if you transition your kinship system from a matrilocal system to a patrilocal system, you can keep that tomb in the family. Otherwise, you can't. You have to get these easements onto it. So my belief is that the Chinese system of Confucianism and the very patriarchal family, which is kind of Roman, is in order to maintain possession of tombs. And those are the first cities. That's my theory. And all the reading I did was to try and delve into that issue. So that was amazing. J.M.M. de Groot. So I'm going to hurry things along because I got a meeting in 15 minutes. Let's just jump into. So this year I had the opportunity to review anthropology books, and the two that I picked were Legacies of War, Violence, Ecologies, and Kin, which is about Peru. the Peruvian Civil War, 1980 to 2000, which I knew nothing about. So it was interesting to kind of read the history of that. Um, and it's also about how some of the children were kind of named after the soldiers who raped the women. Sorry, YouTube, I said the R word. The soldiers that abused the women and had children with them. The children were sometimes given the names of the soldiers to like maintain the memory of this. So it's kind of sobering. Um, Although the author's suggestions for how to fix this are very sort of academic and very liberal suggestions of how to fix these things, right? Abortion, giving rivers rights, and things like that. Um, I wrote a whole review of this thing and submitted it to the journal. The other one was Excited Delirium. Felt like this one was a little bit better, although it's an interesting book because the author is she's in Santeria, I think, that the Spiritism religion, and she's like conjuring dead uh, ghosts. This is a true story. She's like conjuring dead ghosts of people killed by police and thinking that this is like evidence of some kind. Anyway, it's interesting. I wrote reviews for both of them, submitted them to the journal, and they didn't print them. I wonder why. I think I know why. All right, I got two more. Oh, do I? Oh my gosh, I got way more than that. Economic Interpretation of the Constitution of the United States. The reason I read this is because I was doing a radio show about the what was it? Was it the ICE protests? I can't remember, but I did a radio show about that, but we ended up not talking about it. Anyway, this is a really interesting book about the financial interests of the founding fathers and that they were not disinterested. They were very interested in getting a national bank so that they could collect the loans that the farmers were paying. The farmers wanted state banks, so the farmers actually didn't want the Constitution. They wanted the Articles of Confederation. And so what the founders did, according to the author, Charles Beard, the founders convened at the Philadelphia Convention, Constitutional Convention, and the way he frames it, he goes through this line by line, day by day, and it seems as though they kind of rushed this thing, and they got representatives from all the different 13 colonies that were pro-Constitution who had a financial interest in a national bank, so that they could collect on the bonds, and then they pushed the Constitution, and none of the farmers wanted that. And it sounds like a coup. It's kind of interesting. Economic Interpretation. The author is a Quaker. He wrote an amazing history book too called The Rise of American Civilization. Amazing. Uh, I read The Hobbit to my kids. That was amazing. I probably don't need to tell you that though. Okay, last few things I'll go through. I did some Bible study, and I'm big on Bible study, both anthropologically and historically. Richard Elliott Friedman's Who Wrote the Bible. Some might say that this is sacrilegious. His theory is that the Bible is not written by who it says it's written by, and his evidence is overwhelming. Fantastic book. Highly recommend that. Uh, I read and reviewed. Well, I read this man's book, Mauro Bellino, Jesus, Demigod, and Gods of the Bible. Basically, the Elohim were aliens. A little bit far-fetched. Vain traditions, this is a different topic, but this is like part of the Hebrew roots movement, which kind of like takes issues with Christians and Jews. Find it to be a little bit extremist, kind of scary, and aspects of motion perception. I read this for studying, for Fringe as well. This is not a well-written book, but the content's incredible. Kohlers, he cites Wertheimer's studies on motion perception, where basically if you flash a light on a wall here and you flash a light on the wall here after it, that the human mind, depending on the speed that the lights are flashed in, will like fill in the gap with either a blur, which is called phi motion, or a dot, which is called beta motion, which means that when we see motion, our brain is constantly injecting memories as if it happened. And he did that study in the late 19th century, and this really became instrumental in making film projectors and cameras, and it was the creation of cinema is kind of predicated on this stuff. And the idea that like our brain is creating false memories 24 times a second in movies is like kind of eye-opening. Fascinating stuff. Take a couple more questions here. Um, okay, let's see. Uh, do 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 do. My Spaniard ancestors knew a little about all that. Like talking about South America. One of the craziest stories that Darwin talks about in Voyage of the Beagle is I can't remember the guy's name, but there was it was like a half native Chilean who was loyal to the Spanish crown. So Spain had this kind of system of kind of like it's kind of a donation system where the Spanish crown was paying the native populations in Chile to kind of like keep them at bay because Chile is really complicated. Dario, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this too. But the Andes is this like area where like Europeans just had no idea where they were going. You have to have a guide when you go into the Andes, and so these guerrillas would come in and out of the Andes, and they were impossible to track. And so this half native, these four brothers, I'll get their names sometime, but they were loyal to the Spanish crown. But in like around 1830 or so, the Chilean aristocracy that owned the land, they were like native. I think they were native landowners. They wanted to transition. Maybe they were half. I don't know. I don't know what the race was, but anyway, they wanted to transition Chile into a republic and be independent of Spain. And there was these four guys who were loyal to the Spanish crown, and so they started doing raids. And they had a bunch of like the native population helping them so that they could kind of navigate the Andes, right? And it's just a fascinating. Let me get those names for you right now because it is so fascinating that like let me see, is it in here? Where is it? Voyage of the Beagle, brothers. Oops, can't spell brothers. Okay, Pincheras. I'm just gonna read it. Four mestizo royalist brothers they were gauchos, kind of like cowboys, who came from the low caste but fought for the crown against an independent Chile. The Spanish crown had offered the Indian group some rights and gifts in exchange for peace, done through a formal meeting called Parlamentos. And the crown recognized the Biobío River as a border, which gave Mapuche sovereignty south of it. Yeah, that was like the native area. The new Republic of Chile, mostly headed by an aristocratic class of white Creole landowners, wanted to expand southward into those Indian lands. And the Pincheras had been corporals in the Royalist army, refused amnesty from Chilean Republicans, fearing they would be killed, so they were caught. So they created. Oh, they were going to be like subsumed into this like Chilean Republic, right? But they didn't want to, because they thought they would be killed. So they made the Pinchera state allied with the natives and knew the complex passages through the Andes. And when Spain lost against the Republicans, the Pincheras refused to back down, and they allied with more Indian groups. The groups were the Pehuenche, Borano, and Mapuche, and they conducted raids through the Andes. And this is a quote here. This racial mixture was one reason the patriot governments of Chile and Argentina hated them so much. The Pincheras represented a race war or a class uprising of the lower mixed race castes against the white European descended elite of the new republic. So Rosas in Argentina tried to attack him. He set his general Bulnes against him, and they routed him. One of the brothers, Jose Antonio, was captured but pardoned in order to pacify his Indian allies. Fascinating time. There's also an Irish. Okay, yeah, Mapuche is a big issue up to this date. It's interesting. Um, Tehuelche, yeah, maybe that's it. Yeah, again, this is Darwin. Some of the names are possibly wrong. There was also an Irish. What was his name? Governor. It was an Irish governor who his name was Ambrose O'Higgins. He was the governor of Chile, 1788 to 1796. and he became Viceroy of Peru, highest ranking position in the Spanish Americas. I know nothing about South American politics, and this is just so fascinating. So that's actually like one of the things that was so interesting about Darwin's voyage on the Beagle. Um, yeah, Dario, check out Voyage of the Beagle. There's not really actually that much history in it, so it might not be worth reading. Most of it's like describing estuaries and lagoons and the fauna. It's kind of boring, I gotta admit. I have like a minute to discuss anything else. Last thing, this I read this monolithic thing, so I'm trying to understand the history of Christianity, the history of theology, which I think is Lutheran, and he goes through just like this is like a very uh, thorough examination of kind of ecclesiastical history in Europe. Pretty much only in Europe. He doesn't really talk about America, and I'm kind of surprised because having read the Bible a few times, the things that always stick out to me in the Bible are, burning bush, the tabernacle, David, uh, Babylon. These are the things that in the Second Temple. These are the things that like really, really stick out to me, and I'm kind of shocked that the history of ecclesiastical history is mostly concerned with like the Lord's Supper, the Lord's Supper, and transubstantiation versus consubstantiation, baptism, double predestination versus regular predestination, stuff that like I don't care about, and I kind of like feel disenfranchised. I just never care about any of that stuff. Last question. Thank you again, Byron. Do you feel we'll ever be able to hack into each other's limbic system? Is the future pure psychological warfare? I don't know, man. Maybe if we get those brain chips. Otherwise, I don't know if that's possible. I have a feeling the minute you hack into somebody's limbic system, there would be some kind of like domestication override that our genome would push. I feel like that's what domestication does, is that when you have these like security breaches, domestication will like start altering the phenotype, and it'll like do different gene expressions. So your genetics don't really change, it's just the expression changes. This is a really interesting book called The First 500 Days, I think it is. Where is it? I hope I have it here, 'cause I really want to start reading. I think it's at home. But it's a study of how astronauts they change genetically. Well, the phenotype, the gene expression changes for astronauts in like 500 days in space. Like we change so fast. So I wouldn't be surprised if that would be kind of a dead end. Unless you've sort of subjected yourself to, Neuralink, and like you just kind of want like all the fancy kind of gadgets that come with that, increased IQ, and who knows what they're gonna push, man. This is kind of the era for stuff like that, where there are gonna be these like super brain chips going around, and I think I'll wait for the 100-year study on those. At any rate, thank you again for the generosity, Byron. The two $10 donations, it's much appreciated. Uh, Thank you all. That was a lot of fun. I could have gone another hour, but lots of fun updates. Join the Discord. Please join the Discord. I'm going to put the link in chat right now. If you're not on the Discord, you got to join. It's the coolest place in the world. It's the old forum, but new. Some People Forum 2.0.